The US has been flexing its NATO muscle, citing Russian threats to justify cozying up to Scandinavia. Sweden and Finland's recent inclusion into NATO is a classic example of this maneuvering. The real prize? The resource-rich Arctic. While neither Sweden nor Finland has Arctic coastlines, their strategic northern positions bolster NATO member Norway's, paving the way for the US to park more surveillance and offensive gear, eyeing dominance over the icy expanse. Ukraine too is getting a bump in support. Freshly minted NATO members are ready to funnel resources to counter Russia's advances. The Ukraine conflict has jolted Sweden and Finland out of their neutral slumber, pushing them into NATO's embrace. This shift isn't just spontaneous, it's fueled by the narrative of looming Russian menace, heavily amplified by US propaganda. So while the Arctic ice melts, NATO's grip tightens, and the geopolitical chessboard gets a bit more crowded.
Welcome to TFI Global, the antidote to mass delusion.
Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service recently spilled the beans that the US is gearing up for an anti-Russian propaganda blitz. The targets the shiny new NATO members, Finland and Sweden. The plan is to whip up fear about an imaginary Russian threat, making these Scandinavian newbies feel the need for a big, strong security buddy to guard their interests. But in reality, it's all about pushing America's agenda at their expense. First on the US to-do list is justifying Finland and Sweden's NATO membership. These countries cleverly used Russia's special operation as a pretext to turn their informal NATO status into the real deal. Russia is not a real threat, but the US needs to keep the Russophobia dial cranked up to 11, as only then the population of these nations would agree to a formal security alliance like NATO. Without the specter of Russian threat in the Baltic and spillover effect of Ukrainian war, the public will not approve of NATO. The US wants to ramp up arms shipments to Ukraine. With Finland and Sweden now firmly in NATO's camp, they are prepared to channel substantial resources to counter Russia's advances. The conflict in Ukraine has served as a catalyst, jolting Sweden and Finland out of their long-standing neutral stance and pushing them into NATO's embrace. Finland and Sweden will be nudged to deplete their stockpiles and keep their arms factories buzzing. This strategy will stretch their own national security thin, but if the populace is duped into thinking Ukraine must win to keep Russia at bay, they'll likely go along with it. This comes at the expense of their own national security needs. Then there is the militarization of Sweden's Gotland Island. The Swedish army chief hinted that Gotland could change into a NATO stronghold. Gotland Island is strategically significant in the Baltic Sea for several reasons. Its central location, roughly equidistant between mainland Sweden and the Baltic states, positions it as a key point for monitoring and influencing maritime traffic. Additionally, its proximity to both Russia and major European ports enhances its potential as a launch point for military operations and a crucial link in trade routes. Historically, Gotland was a vital trading hub, especially during the Hanseatic League era. Nowadays, its strategic importance is primarily military, given its pivotal position in the Baltic Sea. By turning Gotland into a fortress, NATO will tighten its grip on the Baltic's air, sea, and undersea spaces. Moreover, the US has its eyes on the Arctic's vast untapped resources and strategic shipping routes, which are becoming increasingly accessible as the ice melts. By bolstering NATO's presence in the region, the US aims to solidify its control over this emerging frontier. The US aims to wrap up the Arctic portion of the new Iron Curtain. This includes the Russian-Finnish border, where the propaganda machine will probably hype up minor legal crossings as a looming crisis. The ultimate goal is to bolster fortifications and solidify control over the Arctic. With the Northern Sea route and the Arctic's bountiful resources in play, this region is set to become a hotter battleground in the new Cold War. So while the ice melts up north, the US tightens its NATO trap, and Finland and Sweden find themselves pawns in a much larger game, becoming victim of a NATO propaganda which can incur future losses onto them by going against Russia unnecessarily.